Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's April 13th, 2021, and today's video is a video about us selling some potted fig trees. We do not ship any trees or bushes at this time. So these are in pots. The prices range from $15 on up to $70 for our biggest pots and all. And so what this video is going to do, what I'm trying to do in this video is share with you some of my thoughts based on experience raising potted fig trees, and so what you can expect. So fig trees were first, I think, identified in Asia, and they've been raised throughout the world. They're in all countries, even in very colder places than where we live, but they're usually kept indoors. They're described as being a more Mediterranean-like plant. They're subtropical in a sense. So they're drought tolerant. They do require very well drained soil. So in the pots, there has to be the holes in the pots. They don't need to be watered as frequently as other plants, potted plants that you may have. So they're not like a cactus or a succulent, but they don't need as much water as many of the indoor plants that you might think of. The plants produce a beautiful fruit that tastes delicious, that is very sweet with lots of fiber. So it's a really balanced whole foods sweetener that can be used in other dishes to sweeten things up, just like dates can be used. Figs can be a bit of a challenge in a very cold temperate climate like we live in. We live in Zone 5A, Oswego, New York, lots of overcast, harsh winters. So what I'd recommend for people purchasing plants in this part of the country is to realize that it's best to bring the pots indoors during the winter months. After, when the first frost comes, know when the first frost is, know when the last frost is, and be willing to take your pots and put them inside to store them for the winter months. That could be in your house, could be in your garage, could be in another building. Some people put up a small greenhouse for them or solarium off to the side of their house. Those things can all work pretty darn well for raising the fig trees and keeping them during their dormancy over wintertime. I just turned on the LED shop-like lights over in the coop area today, and so that will allow the foliage to maintain balance. The leaf buds are emerging at this time, and they're going to start shooting up. So figs are rapidly growing plants. They can grow several feet. They can get to be 10 feet tall. But growing them in a pot, I'd recommend keep growing them like an apple tree, like a single trunk with a modified central leader, and that way we can get fruit off it. Now, someday when I finish the greenhouse, we'll grow the figs in there, and we'll grow them in a totally different way, where the main limbs will go out laterally to the sides, and then each year they'll send up new shoots, and there'll be fruit produced on those shoots. So, but for right now, let's just talk about the basic pots. There need to be holes in the pots. They need to be really well drained. Now the soil in our pots is all the material loaded with microorganisms. It's like our outdoor plants. So they're kept in dormancy during the wintertime in the coop area, but then during the summertime, after the last frost, we bring them outside so that they can be out in the full sun. So fig trees really do best, and you're going to get your best fruit production by having them in 7 to 8 hours of full sun each day. So that would also mean, geez, you need to look on your property and say, where will things work out? They love the heat as well. So having them on asphalt or concrete or stones or up against a south-facing wall will help to warm those plants, because the sun will radiate on the concrete, warm that up, and that'll hold some heat. The pots are often black. That'll hold some heat as well. So that'll make sure that what the fig loves is that warm, well-drained soil, watered adequately but not overwatered, and they'll do great. Like I mentioned, the soil within our pots is all broken down organic material loaded with microorganisms and all. Now, if you want maximal fruit production, and you're not into all the gardening stuff that we are here, then people will often fertilize once a week or every 2 weeks. But you would stop probably in August, because that fertilization is going to stimulate lots of vegetative growth. That's the growth of the branches and stems coming up. Also in August, in order to maximize fruit production, you're going to want to pinch off the top, and it decreases apical dominance. So these are going to want to keep shooting out straighter and straighter and throw up a big tall one. If it's starting to get real wobbly, you pinch it off earlier than that. But you're going to want to pinch these off relatively early in the season, probably in June around here, and that way they'll have 90 days for the fruit to develop. So by pinching the top, that decreases apical dominance, saying no more shooting up and trying to do all this growth, and it'll send more energy to the fruit. Once you see the little fruit about the size of a pea or a bean that's set, it takes 90 days from that point on till the fruit is fully mature and ready to harvest. So you need to do your calculations and know, when is my first frost in the fall time, count back 90 days so that you're going to pinch that a few days before that, the top of the branches that are shooting up. And as I mentioned before, it's probably best to grow them like an apple tree, so a single trunk, especially if you're not going to be hauling around a great big pot. They can be smaller pots as well. Otherwise, the more top growth they get, the more root development they get, and they need to be potted up into bigger and bigger pots as well. I learned that the hard way. Then you're lugging around these great big pots with these big plants that are trying to get through doorways and all. So I'd recommend having a few small fig trees that you manage, easy to move around, you don't hurt yourself as well. What else can I say about them? So we talked about fertilizer versus the permaculture way, using all the nutrients in soil loaded with microorganisms. We talk about 90 days from the time that the fruit sets until the time of frost. And we talked about putting them in a place where they get at least 7 to 8 hours of full sun during the daytime, and they love the heat, and they don't need to be overwatered. Some folks will mention decreasing the watering as the fruit is getting close to harvesting, and I think that's fine. Because we grow these outdoors all the time. If it rains, it rains. I don't pay too much attention. And the reason that they say that is because the fruit will absorb more water and sort of dilute the sweetness. It's like salt water. It's through osmosis. So with the sugars inside of the fruit, it's going to draw more water to that fruit and potentially make it taste less sweet. I've never noticed that. I think they taste absolutely fantastic to me. But if you've got a real super sweet tooth, you might want to decrease watering just before you're ready to harvest that fruit as well. Okay, so the two varieties we have once again are Chicago Hardy and Brown Turkey Fig. They're both known as being the most cold tolerant. There may be other varieties that are being developed at this point that may be more cold tolerant, but nothing that I've seen that come close to Zone 5A so far. I'd love to get my hands on some and graft some if that's necessary for things that are much more cold hardy as well. I think I've covered everything. What we're going to do now is go over to the coop area. We'll look at the plants. I'll repeat some of these things during the video. And if you have comments or questions, put them in the link below. Again, we don't ship any of these plants. We don't send them anyplace. We don't have that facility, those abilities yet. So if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. If you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thanks so much, folks, and have a super fantastic day. Stay safe. Bye-bye now. Okay, I'm over here in the coop area. Mr. Quackers is outside, the Khaki Campbell duck. And so today we're talking about our potted fig trees. Now we have potted fig trees for sale, I'm sorry. And they range in price from $15 and $20 for the smaller pots, and then on up for the various larger ones as well. So most of the ones you see here in this row are $15 to $20, and there's some that go up to $70 actually. So today I thought I'd talk about some of the features of potted fig trees. We love figs. They're very nutritious. They're very sweet, so they can be used to sweeten up in other dishes, as opposed to using processed sugar. But we're not going to talk about that today. So what are the things about and I've made videos in the past about growing figs in the ground. We've had limited success with that. So I thought I'd talk about having the potted fig trees. And we're in Oswego, New York, which is zone 5A. We have 170 days of growing season in this area. And these are more Mediterranean type plants. They're actually from Asia, and there's many different varieties. And the two varieties that we have, which I cannot tell the difference between because the labels all came off during our high winds when they're outside, unfortunately. So we have brown turkey figs and Chicago hardy fig trees. These are both very well known for being cold tolerant. These are more of a subtropical type of plant. They're very drought tolerant. Some people don't like giving them too much water at all to make the sugar content relative to water seem sweeter. I think they absolutely taste delicious, whether they're getting watered more or not. Now, it's essential that the pots be well draining pots. They don't like wet feet, so the pot's got to have really good drainage. That's important. The figs are vigorous growers. They can grow several feet in a year's time. And so the amount of soil that's there and how much you fertilize them is going to determine how much they're going to actually grow. When they're grown in pots, I think it's best to grow them as a single trunk and do like an apple tree, a modified central leader or whatever. If you're going to be putting them into a greenhouse, then I would have the low-lying varieties with long lateral branches, and every year let new shoots come straight up. And that way you get a lot of fruit off of a single tree. But most people are just going to buy a few fig trees and keep them in small pots like this, and they can do very well. Now, if you do end up fertilizing, which we don't do here, we're more permaculturists, so we feed the soil and the soil feeds the trees or the bushes, whatever it is that we're growing here. So the soil has all the microorganisms in it, and it's fed organic material like wood chips and mulch and leaves, those sorts of things. And all the microorganisms and macroorganisms take the nutrients from those areas and then feed the fig trees themselves. If you're fertilizing the fig trees, one of the things you want to do is you want to stop fertilizing in this part of the country probably around in August. And that's to allow the new growth, so this is last year's growth here, to become lignified, to turn brown and get woody. As opposed to this new growth here, which has just started this last week, and you can see these things rapidly grow. That is not lignified. It's very fragile. It's more frost intolerant. This is more frost tolerant. But when we get down to the really sub-zero temperatures, below freezing, well below freezing here, that can kill off even this lignified wood that's outside. It can kill off the roots in pots if they're left outside. So you want to be very much aware of when your frost dates are so that you can bring them into a garage or bring them into a basement or bring them into a building, someplace that's going to protect them, or you can use some of the techniques that we've talked about in other videos for insulating them. I've talked about digging holes to put the pots in the holes so you have the thermal mass of the earth as well, but we're not going to really talk about that today. So these are real heat seekers. They're like reptiles. They get more active and grow more and produce more in full sun and lots of warmth. So putting black pots on top of asphalt or concrete or stones, the concrete's going to heat up during the daytime and maintain some heat during the evening hours and help to keep the roots on these trees warmer. Putting them up against a south-facing wall is going to allow them to get as much sun as possible. Full sun is best. If you want to have fruit from these figs from these trees that is mature, they really need 7 to 8 hours of full sun every day. So that's important. The figs, once the fruit's set on the fig trees themselves, once you see the tiny little fruit just starting to show up on the tree itself, it takes 90 days for those figs to actually mature to the point where they're good enough to start eating. So that's important. So they love the heat. They love well-drained soil. They don't need as much watering as other plants. They need lots of sunlight. If they're in pots, I would say in Oswego, New York, you need to make plans for bringing these inside unless there's a lot of extra work or things that you want to do to maintain them during the winter months that we have here in Oswego, New York. What else did I want to say about these? They are nutritious. They love full sun. They don't need as much water. They're vigorous growers. If you're fertilizing them, I think I mentioned this, you want to cut the fertilizer in August because you want all of the new green growth that's starting to actually become lignified, turn brown like this, and turn more woody. This woody material and the new growth is what's really going to produce the fruit each year, so pruning them back is important. So in June, you want to pinch the tops of these fruits. Since it takes so you just pinch the very top of the new growth that's coming up, and that it will signal the plant to stop doing as much vertical growth, or it'll deter apical dominance, and it'll actually send more energy to the fruit that has already been set. So that way, in theory, the figs themselves will reach maturity before the frosts come at the end of the season. And I think that's about all I wanted to say about the fig trees. So if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. If you have experience with growing fig trees, please do that as well. And I just turned on these LED lights up here today. And the reason that I turned them on is because we have our west-facing windows over here, which this is up against our work area in here, and there's solid walls around. So no light other than just coming from the west would come down on top of these plants. And the south-facing, as you can see, maybe the south-facing windows, there's more leaf expansion at this point. They're emerging much more rapidly and thoroughly. But in order to not have the plants tipped in one direction, that's the only reason I'm turning on these lights at this point, because the leaves are emerging at this point, and I want to have the trees be balanced and not lean towards the western windows, since these are next to the eastern wall here. So with that, I'll close this up.